Late last week, Carney agreed to allow 49,000 Chinese EVs into Canada with a tariff rate of 6.1%. It's a measure that had been in place before Ottawa put that 100% tariff on all Chinese EVs in 2024. In exchange for the deal, Carney says he expects China to lower tariffs on Canadian canola to 15% by March.
Middle powers must act together because if we're not at the table, we're on the menu. That was Mark Carney, Prime Minister of Canada, speaking from World Economic Forum stage in Davos, Switzerland, January 20th, 2026. Historic speech. 80 years of U.S.-led global order declared over, not transitioning, not pausing, over. Carney stood before European leaders, business titans, heads of state, declared permanent rupture in Western alliance, called out U.S. decline in real time. And Trump responded exactly as predicted with rage insults and zero counter strategy. While Trump threatened annexation and tariffs, Carney flew to Beijing and secured visa-free travel for 2 million Chinese Canadians. While Trump alienated NATO allies and mocked European leaders, Carney negotiated 49,000 Chinese EVs at 6.1% tariff, down from 100%. While Trump delivered teleprompter platitudes at Davos, Carney got standing ovation for declaring America unreliable. The shock is complete. U.S. moral authority just evaporated on world stage, and California Governor Gavin Newsom watched from audience stunned. Today we are showing you exactly how Carney's WEF speech transformed global perceptions of American leadership, how 49,000 Chinese electric vehicles enter Canada without U.S. approval, how 2 million Chinese Canadians bypass U.S. airports entirely with visa-free Beijing access, how $3 billion in canola exports unlock after tariffs dropped from 84% to 15%, how Trump's annexation threats pushed middle powers into permanent coordination against Washington, and how Newsom, speaking at same forum, admitted U.S. moral authority is gone and won't return under current leadership. But before we dive in, if you appreciate analysis like this, hit that like button and subscribe to stay informed on stories that matter. January 20th, 2026, Congress Center, Davos. Mark Carney took stage for his first World Economic Forum address as Prime Minister. Room filled with anticipation. 8 years since Canadian PM visited China. Decade of frozen Canada-China relations over Meng Wanzhou arrest detention of 2 Michaels, canola bans, diplomatic isolation. Carney reset all of it in one Beijing trip. Now standing before a global elite to explain why. His opening line cut through. We are in midst of a rupture, not a transition. Not diplomatic hedging. Not careful language. Direct declaration. The post-1945 order NATO transatlantic partnership, U.S. leadership collapsing in real time, not evolving, collapsing. Then core message. Middle powers must act together because if we're not at table, we're on menu. This is existential framing. Countries like Canada, EU members, Japan, South Korea all face choice. Coordinate independently or get dominated by U.S. unilateralism and Chinese economic gravity. Carney chose coordination, publicly, irreversibly. He detailed Canada-China partnership announced days earlier, visa-free travel for Canadians 30 days without paperwork, tariff reductions on canola from 84% to 15%, unlocking $3 billion in exports, electric vehicle quotas 49,000 Chinese EVs annually at 6.1% tariff with 50% priced under $35,000 by 2030. Energy cooperation, agricultural expansion, cultural exchanges, museum partnerships, digital creator collaborations. But Carney's most devastating line targeted Trump directly. When asked whether China is more predictable partner than United States, Carney didn't deflect. He stated clearly, in terms of way our relationship has progressed in recent months with China, it is more predictable, and you see results coming from that. A Canadian Prime Minister, U.S. neighbor and historic ally, publicly declared Beijing more reliable than Washington, not because of ideology, because of predictability, because Chinese agreements hold while Trump's change with his mood. The room erupted in applause. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen nodded. French President Macron's delegation took notes. Business leaders logged the message. America is no longer a stable center of global trade. Trump's unpredictability created opportunity for everyone seeking alternatives. Gavin Newsom sat in that audience, California governor, Democratic presidential hopeful, watching Canadian Prime Minister receive standing ovation for criticizing U.S. leadership. Newsom later told reporters, Carney got in Trump's head. You could see it yesterday when Trump brought up speech off script. Trump did exactly that. During his own Davos address, January 21st, Trump deviated from teleprompter to attack Carney by name, called speech insulting, suggested Canada should be grateful for U.S. protection, demanded Carney apologize. The defensive posture proved Carney's point. U.S. leadership now reactive, emotional, weak. Newsom's own Davos appearance turned chaotic. His scheduled fireside chat at USA House official American venue got canceled. Newsom blamed Trump administration for barring his access. Instead, Newsom held impromptu session where he distributed Trump-branded knee pads to audience, symbolic prop American and European CEOs, academics, politicians, all on their knees before Trump's chaos. Newsom's bitterness was palpable. I thought it was ironic that Pravda Fox News in America got offended by my language. Where hell have you been while Trump dresses up Pope in tweets and cosplays on world stage? Translation: U.S. political discourse is broken, moral authority evaporated, and Carney's speech formalized what everyone already knew. Canada-China relations were frozen for 8 years. Meng Wanzhou arrest in Vancouver, December 2018. Huawei CFO detained on U.S. extradition request. China retaliated immediately. Arrested Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor, 2 Canadians in China, on espionage charges. Hostage diplomacy. 2 Michaels held for 1,019 days. Released only after Meng's extradition case resolved September 2021, but damage done. China imposed 84% tariffs on Canadian canola major agricultural export. Blocked Canadian beef, pork, soybeans. Diplomatic exchanges ceased. High-level visits ended. Trade declined. Canada lost access to world's second-largest economy, all because Canada honored U.S. extradition treaty. Canada acted as reliable ally. Arrested Meng, despite knowing Chinese retaliation would follow. Endured economic pain and diplomatic isolation. Expected U.S. support in return. Instead, Trump 1.0 offered nothing. No trade compensation, no diplomatic backing, no gratitude, just expectation that Canada would absorb costs of U.S. rivalry with China. When Trump left office January 2021, Canada still isolated from China, still facing tariffs, still without resolution. Biden administration 2021 to 2025 continued same approach. Pressured Canada to ban Huawei from 5G networks. Canada complied. Pressured Canada to join AUKUS security framework. Canada declined, but maintained defensive cooperation. Pressured Canada to boycott Beijing Olympics. Canada sent smaller delegation. Every request positioned as alliance loyalty test. Every compliance treated as baseline expectation, not partnership. Canada hemorrhaging trade with China, 100 billion plus annual relationship shrinking, while U.S. offered no alternative markets. Then Trump 2.0 arrived. Inauguration January 20th, 2025. Immediately threatened Canada with 25% tariffs on all imports. Suggested military control of Canadian resources. Mused publicly about annexation. Called Canada 51st state. Insulted Trudeau repeatedly. This created political opening for Carney, elected Prime Minister November 2025 after Trudeau resigned. Carney's platform, economic sovereignty, diversified trade, reduced U.S. dependence. Canadian public exhausted from Trump's bullying. 68% support reducing U.S. trade exposure. Carney had mandate. December 2025, Carney announced Beijing visit. First Canadian PM to visit China since Trudeau's 2017 trip. Opposition parties criticized. U.S. State Department expressed concern. Carney ignored both. January 16th, 2026, Carney met Xi Jinping in Great Hall of the People, Beijing, announced comprehensive partnership reset, visa-free travel, tariff reductions, EV quotas, energy deals, agricultural access, cultural exchanges, everything frozen for 8 years, unfrozen in one meeting. Xi called it turning point in relations. Carney emphasized people-to-people connections, the 2 million Chinese Canadians maintaining homeland ties. Both leaders framed partnership as long-term strategic permanent. 4 days later, Carney stood at Davos and explained why. Because U.S. is unreliable, because Trump's chaos makes planning impossible, because agreements with China hold while agreements with America dissolve, because middle powers must coordinate or get crushed. That historical arc from Meng arrest to Davos declaration explains everything. Canada tried loyalty, got nothing. Tried patience, got insults. Tried accommodation, got annexation threats. So Canada built alternative and announced it on world's biggest stage. The Canada-China partnership isn't symbolic. It's infrastructure, it's quotas, it's tariffs, it's measurable economic realignment, electric vehicles, 49,000 Chinese EVs imported annually at 6.1% tariff, down from 100% tariff imposed in 2024 alongside U.S. policy. By 2030, 50% of these EVs must be priced under $35,000, Canadian affordable for middle-class buyers. BYD, Geely, NIO, all exploring Canadian manufacturing. Carney met with unnamed Chinese automakers during Beijing trip, discussed building plants in Ontario. Any operations must follow Canadian labor laws. This bypasses U.S. auto supply chain completely. No Detroit parts, no Michigan assembly, no American union labor. Canadian consumers get affordable EVs. Chinese manufacturers get North American access. U.S. gets nothing, visa-free travel. Canadians enter China for 30 days without visa. Canada joins 45 countries with this privilege. No application fees, no embassy visits, no processing delays, just passport and plane ticket. Reciprocal arrangement allows Chinese citizens similar access to Canada. 2 million Chinese Canadians benefit immediately. Largest concentrations in Vancouver and Toronto, Richmond, Markham, Montreal, Calgary. These communities maintain strong homeland ties, visit family, conduct business, attend weddings and funerals, buy property, invest. Visa-free access eliminates bureaucratic friction. 300,000 Chinese tourists visited Canada in 2024. Industry analysts project 600,000 annually by 2029 once visa-free access fully implemented. All direct arrivals, no U.S. transit required. No layovers in Seattle or Los Angeles. No spending in American airports or hotels. Permanent revenue loss for U.S. border cities. Canola tariffs reduced from 84% to 15%. Unlocks $3 billion in annual export orders. Canadian prairie farmers, Saskatchewan, Alberta, Manitoba, produce world's highest quality canola oil. China is largest market. Tariffs blocked access for 8 years, now restored. Farmers planting for 2026 harvest with China, orders confirmed. LNG energy. Canada scaling liquefied natural gas exports to 50 million tons annually by 2030, all targeting Asian markets. China is major customer. Pro-China owns 15% of LNG Canada project. Chinese investment flows into Canadian energy infrastructure, diversifies away from U.S. pipeline dependence. Agricultural expansion, beyond canola, lobster, crab peas, lentils, beef, pork, all accessing Chinese market with reduced barriers. $8 billion annual agricultural trade potential. Canadian farmers diversify from U.S.-dependent exports. Cultural cooperation, museum exchanges, digital creator partnerships, film co-productions, educational exchanges, Mandarin language programs in Canadian schools, Chinese language services in Canadian tourism infrastructure, all building long-term people-to-people foundation. FIFA World Cup 2026. Canada co-hosts with U.S. and Mexico. Vancouver and Toronto are host cities. Carney invited Chinese fans during Beijing visit. With visa-free access, Chinese sports fans attend matches in Canada without paperwork. Industry estimates 200,000 plus Chinese visitors for tournament. All direct arrivals, no U.S. transit, no American tourism revenue. These aren't projections. These are signed agreements, infrastructure commitments, budget allocations, multi-year contracts, physical reality. And Trump cannot reverse any of it, cannot block visa-free travel bilateral agreement, cannot stop EV imports, sovereign trade policy, cannot prevent canola exports, WTO compliant tariff reductions, cannot restrict LNG deals, commercial contracts, zero leverage. Carney's Davos speech wasn't just about Canada-China partnership. It was about U.S. irrelevance. The old world order is not coming back. Might not return. Not faces challenges. Not coming back. Definitive. Permanent. The 80-year structure of U.S.-led alliances, NATO coordination, transatlantic trade integration finished. Middle powers must act together because if we're not at table, we're on menu. This is survival framing, not partnership with U.S., partnership without U.S., or even against U.S. unilateralism. Carney didn't mention Trump by name during speech, didn't need to. Everyone understood target. When powerful nations resort to economic pressure to achieve their objectives, direct reference to Trump's tariff threats. Predictability matters more than ideological alignment, explaining China preference. European leaders absorbed message immediately. Ursula von der Leyen's speech next day echoed Carney's themes. Europe must act independently to secure its interests. Translation. EU coordinating with middle powers, not waiting for U.S. leadership. French President Macron's team distributed Carney's speech transcript to diplomatic corps. Message. This is template for European approach. Diversify away from U.S. dependence. U.S. border cities face immediate economic loss. Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, major Asia-Pacific hub. Chinese tourists and Chinese Canadians used Seattle as gateway. Landing fees, passenger spending, hotels, car rentals, restaurants all captured Canada-China transit value. Visa-free access eliminates Seattle completely. Direct Vancouver-Beijing flights, no U.S. layovers. Buffalo-Niagara region dependent on Canadian tourism. Peace Bridge connects Fort Erie to Buffalo. Chinese tourists visiting Niagara Falls Canadian side often crossed to American side. Buffalo hotels, outlet, shopping. Local economy relied on Canadian visitors. Visa-free China access means Chinese tourists stay Canadian side. No crossings, no spending in Buffalo, permanent revenue loss. Detroit-Windsor Tunnel and Ambassador Bridge, busiest Canada-U.S. border crossing. Chinese Canadians from Toronto use Detroit Airport for international flights. Better connections sometimes. Detroit captured this spending. Now Chinese Canadians use Toronto Pearson Airport for direct China flights. Detroit loses traffic. Every cross-border business loses customers. Airport workers, hotel staff, restaurant employees, retail, all facing reduced hours or job losses. Tax revenues drop, municipal budgets squeezed, services cut, infrastructure deferred, downward spiral of border economies dependent on traffic that evaporated. Worse, Trump cannot fix it, cannot offer visa-free China travel. Federal policy cities have no control over. Cannot eliminate U.S. visa requirement that drives traffic to Canadian airports. Cannot match Canada's China partnership because U.S. maintains adversarial stance. Cities are collateral damage in Trump's backfired trade war. They have no policy tools. Federal government controls visas, international relations trade. Cities economically dependent on Canadian cross-border traffic, all threatened. Gavin Newsom recognized this in Davos. During his moderated conversation, Newsom stated, "There were moments when I was listening to EU presidents speak where I said, that used to be us." I remember that. Nostalgia for when U.S. provided moral leadership, economic stability, predictable partnership. I think we need little moral authority in our body politic in United States of America today. Admission, moral authority is gone. Trump destroyed it. Carney's speech documented the loss publicly. It is code red, blinking red in United States of America. Newsom's most direct warning, U.S. could lose our republic as we know it, not hyperbole. Recognition that Trump's chaos has geopolitical consequences. Allies stop waiting for U.S. leadership. They build alternatives. Carney proved it. Trump's defensive response confirmed weakness, attacking Carney by name during Davos speech, demanding Canada be grateful, threatening unspecified retaliation, all reactive, all emotional, all revealing that Trump has no strategy to counter middle power coordination. Newsom summarized, Trump is invasive species. He took over Republican Party, but invasive species disrupt ecosystems. Trump disrupted global order. And Carney's response building alternative structures shows disruption is permanent. This is not temporary. This is infrastructure. This is law. This is signed agreements that outlast administrations. Infrastructure permanence. Air Canada adding direct routes to China. Chinese carriers increasing frequency to Vancouver and Toronto. New city pairs, more options, better pricing. Once established routes create facts on ground. Airport slots allocated. Aircraft positioned, cruise-based, marketing launched. Multi-year commitments cannot easily reverse. Canadian tourism infrastructure adapting. Hotels investing in Mandarin-speaking staff, Chinese payment systems like WeChat Pay and Alipay cultural training for Chinese guests, all targeting Chinese tourist influx simplified by visa-free access. Travel agencies in China promoting Canada packages. Rocky Mountains, Niagara Falls. Northern Lights all marketed directly without visa complications. Infrastructure creates path dependency. Once built, sustains itself. Visa-free access enabled investment. Investment makes visa-free access permanent necessity, self-reinforcing. Trade permanence. 49,000 Chinese EVs annually isn't one-time deal. its quota system, its customs procedures, its inspection protocols, its dealer networks. Once Chinese EV brands establish Canadian presence, showrooms, service centers, parts warehouses, they stay, investment too large to abandon, Canadian canola farmers planting for Chinese market, multi-year contracts, relationship building with Chinese buyers, quality standards aligned, payment terms established, trust developed. Farmers don't switch back to U.S. market without strong reason, found reliable customer, receive fair prices, get paid on time, political permanence. Carney's Beijing trip and Davos speech aren't personal decisions. They're policy platforms he campaigned on. Canadian voters elected him specifically to reduce U.S. dependence. 68% Canadian support for diversified trade. Carney has Democratic mandate, cannot reverse course without political suicide. Similarly in China, Xi Jinping, publicly committed to partnership, hosted Carney in Great Hall of People, announced deals during national media coverage, staked prestige on Canada, relationship succeeding. Xi doesn't abandon commitments lightly, especially not because Trump complains. Legal permanence, visa-free travel is international agreement, registered with International Civil Aviation Organization, embedded in border control systems. Changing requires diplomatic negotiation, legislative action, regulatory revision. Process takes years, won't happen because political winds shift. EV quotas are trade policy written into customs regulations, tariff rates set by cabinet order, inspection procedures established by Canadian Food Inspection Agency and equivalent Chinese bodies, technical infrastructure, legal frameworks, not easily undone. Geopolitical permanence. Carney's Davos declaration formalized what everyone already knew. U.S. is unreliable under Trump. Saying it publicly removes diplomatic pretense, allows middle powers to coordinate openly, creates permission structure for other countries to pursue similar strategies. EU already moving. Von der Leyen's speech referenced Carney's themes. Macron distributing Carney transcript signals French support. Germany, Italy, Spain, all watching. If Canada successfully diversifies from U.S. dependence, others will follow template. This is cascading realignment. Each country that builds alternative to U.S. system makes next country's decision easier. Network effects in reverse. Instead of everyone joining U.S.-led order, everyone building redundancies against U.S. unpredictability, Trump cannot reverse this, cannot threaten Canada into abandoning China partnership threats, accelerated diversification in first place, cannot impose costs that exceed benefits Canada receiving from China deals, cannot offer alternative that matches China's market size and investment capacity. Trump's leverage eliminated by his own actions. Every threat pushed Canada toward alternatives. Every tariff made diversification urgent. Every insult made partnership with China politically easier. Canadian public supports reducing U.S. dependence after Trump's behavior. Carney has political cover to pursue relationships that would have been controversial under different circumstances. Newsom recognized this cannot be undone. These relationships are in dormancy, they're not dead. He's talking about U.S. alliances. Dormant means inactive but alive. But dormancy lasts only if there's hope for revival. And Newsom himself admitted revival requires U.S. moral authority, which is gone under Trump. We need to manifest that, and we need to do hard work. Meaning, rebuilding U.S. leadership will take years, maybe decades, requires policy consistency, diplomatic patience, economic reliability, everything Trump destroyed. Meanwhile, Carney's infrastructure keeps operating. Visa-free travel keeps flowing. Chinese EVs keep arriving. Canola keeps exporting. Canada-China partnership keeps deepening. By time U.S. potentially restores credibility post-Trump, if ever Canada will have decade plus of China integration, investment will be sunk, trade patterns will be established, political relationships will be normalized, reversing becomes prohibitively expensive and politically impossible. Carney framed this as victory, demonstration of Canadian sovereignty, proof of independent foreign policy, evidence that Canada can build partnerships beyond U.S., all politically valuable domestically after Trump's insults. For Canadian tourism industry, visa-free access is massive win. Simplified travel attracts more Chinese visitors. 2 million Chinese Canadians travel more frequently. Domestic tourism spending increases, jobs created, revenue generated, economic growth secured. For Canadian airports, this is competitive advantage. Vancouver becomes premier Pacific gateway. Toronto strengthens position as international hub. Direct connections to China without U.S. competition. Infrastructure investment justified. routes profitable, long-term growth secured. For Canada, China relationship visa free travel builds foundation, people-to-people connections, cultural understanding, business relationships, educational exchanges, all facilitated by visa-free access. Strategic partnership becomes lived reality for millions of travelers. And for Canada's positioning globally, this demonstrates successful diversification from U.S. dependence. Canada can negotiate with China, can secure favorable terms, can build alternatives to American market. Trump's pressure failed. Canadian independence proven. The permanence is complete. Infrastructure built, trade flowing, agreements signed, political capital invested, legal frameworks established, public support secured, geopolitical alignment formalized. Trump's annexation rhetoric backfired catastrophically. Instead of forcing Canadian compliance, pushed Canada to build independence. Instead of increasing U.S. leverage, eliminated it. Instead of making Canada more dependent, made Canada more autonomous. Every Trump threat strengthened case for CPKC for China partnership for middle power coordination. Trump's aggression became best argument for alternatives, and Trump cannot reverse it now. Carney stood on Davos stage and declared publicly, the old order is not coming back. Not prediction, statement of fact. Statement backed by infrastructure, by signed agreements, by 49,000 EV quotas, by visa, free travel for 2 million people, by $3 billion in canola exports, by direct Vancouver-Beijing flights. Trump has no cards to play, no leverage to apply, no strategy to counter, can only rage on social media and attack Canadian Prime Minister by name. Meanwhile, Canada trades with China, bypasses U.S. infrastructure, builds alternatives to American systems, and coordinates with middle powers to ensure we're at table, not on menu. The rupture is permanent.